Every once in a while, I have to do this, and you won't often hear people in my space do this, but I want to do it. I was wrong. I was wrong about something. I want to admit I was wrong about something. Precisely what is this? I really did not think that the Dobbs decision would incite Democratic voters as much as it did. A lot of people said it would, and it's like, no. And initially, a lot of the polling that came out suggested I was right. But what we're actually seeing in the real world versus the polls is that actually it did. Now, you have to understand, though, what's going on here. This is not about converting voters or even bringing new voters out. What the data shows is that what's happening is Democratic voters were probably going to sit this election out. And now a lot of them, particularly female Democratic voters, are fired up over the Dobbs decision, and they intend to go vote in November. And that has something to do with the narrowing of the polls. Democratic voters who are disaffected by and concerned about the economy and inflation and crime and education are fired up about abortion, and they'll go vote. I think, however, though I was wrong about that, I think that the prevailing media consensus is wrong about this. They have bought into the idea, long dismissed by pollsters on both sides, but still conventional wisdom, that if Democrats just show up, they win. That's not true. And it's even less true now than in the past because there has been a shift of non-white voters towards the GOP. Though small, it's significant enough to matter. And independent voters are still overwhelmingly concerned about the economy and not abortion. So yes, this has fired up Democratic voters more than I thought it would. But no, I don't see it now causing Democrats to win in November. And there's a prevailing consensus in the national media that that's exactly what's going to happen. You hear more and more conversations in the national press that suddenly the Democrats have a shot at holding the House. They don't have a shot at holding the House. If these Democrats show up, they will be offset by 1, Republicans, 2, gerrymandered districts, and 3, independent voters also now voting for Republicans. I have told you for months the generic ballot was going to narrow, and it did. Tom Bevan at Real Clear Politics had a piece over the weekend. I've been citing Sean Trendy to everyone about it, but it's actually Tom Bevan's piece showing that in Republican years, you tend to have the exact phenomenon going on right now. As I've told you guys ad nauseum, that you could expect the Democrats and the Republicans to get to parity on the generic ballot before all the votes roll over to likely voters and you see Republicans going up again. And what still matters most to most voters is the economy and inflation and crime. You've got a lot of Democrats out there saying that inflation is now going to be less of an issue for voters. It's rapidly fading. I don't think it is. I think it's just manifesting itself in other ways, very much like the whole trigger for the Biden administration to suddenly go upside down on polling was Afghanistan. And ever since Afghanistan, Joe Biden's polling has been underwater pretty significantly. And it's not like voters now are focused on Afghanistan, but it was a precipitating event that changed their minds on Joe Biden. And so you could get to November and have a lot of voters not at the forefront of their mind focused on inflation per se, but the economic anxiety of their lives will still be caused by inflation. And so indirectly, it'll be inflation as much as Afghanistan still in polling come election day. So I was wrong on the abortion stuff, but here's the other thing. And this needs to be said, and I don't think it's going to be appreciated by the people who should hear it. I was wrong in 2016. I didn't think Trump would win. And the polling confirmed as much that Trump was not going to win. And I was one of the last people to start distrusting the polling. And he won. Now, he didn't win the popular vote, and the polling picked up the popular vote. The polling did a very bad job, though, of translating the popular vote to the Electoral College vote, because the polling looked at the national electorate and not at the swing state battleground electorate. In the polling that's only looking at the battlegrounds, the Republicans are doing pretty good. In fact, the CBS News Battleground Tracker that only looks at battleground states, the Republicans are still up 2 in the generic ballot. So I think this means Republicans aren't going to win they were talking about, we could win a seat that Biden had won by 10 points. No, you're not going to do that now in those coastal areas of the country that are already Democrat. But in suburban areas, that's Biden +2, Biden +3, you can still win. And I think Republicans will. And the larger point here is I was wrong in 2016 and the polling didn't accurately reflect it. And if you were a longtime listener to my program, you will remember the day after the election in 2016, I came on the radio and ate some crow and said, look, if this is the case, if I got it that wrong, I've got to reassess and figure out why I got it wrong and what do I need to listen to that I wasn't otherwise listening to. And a lot of people in the media never did that. And they just assumed it was a fluke and Hillary Clinton won the popular vote and Russia stole it. They never had to reassess. Now, I never bought into the Russia stole the election crap. And a lot of people, they bought into it, if only so they never had to admit they were wrong. I was willing to admit I was wrong. So fast forward to 2020. In 2020, very few people saw the Republican wave coming. Very few people did. There was a blue wave in this country in 2020, and it helped get Joe Biden elected. But what no one saw was the offsetting corresponding red wave, where the Republicans not only picked up some state legislative seats around the country, they picked up New Hampshire. They held seats they were otherwise going to lose. They held legislatures they were otherwise lose at the state level. The Republicans came within about 5 seats of taking back the House of Representatives, and they would have held the Senate had Georgia Republicans not convinced themselves to avoid going to vote. And nobody saw that. And the polling did not pick up that. And so, listen, I go back to 2016. I was wrong about that, and I've clearly been wrong about the impact of abortion on Democratic voters. And again, it's very important you understand, we now have several special elections, and we have the Kansas vote, and here's what we know based on the exits, not based on the polling, but based on the people who actually showed up and vote. What's happening is abortion transcends parties. It's not completely just Democrats who are impacted. There are moderate Republicans who still vote Republican, but are pro-abortion, and they will vote on that issue. They did in Kansas, but also Democratic voters who are going to sit out this election because they're mad at Joe Biden and just say, screw it, let the Republicans have it. They're suddenly fired up enough to show up and vote. It doesn't matter, though, because of the number of independent voters and minority voters who are shifting to the GOP. If they all show up and vote in November, the GOP is still going to have a good night and still probably will take back the Senate. That's getting lost in the murky conversations. And so this goes back to this other point. I'm willing to reassess when I get things wrong, and I think a lot of people in the media aren't. They can't admit it. And in 2020, the very same people who didn't see Trump winning in 2016, they missed the red wave in 2020. And we're seeing now a very cyclical pattern in 2022, just as in 2014, just as in 2010, just as in 2002, midterm elections, the Republicans see the Democrats make inroads in August towards September, and then suddenly the polls switch to likely voters and the Republican base explodes and the Republicans win. We're seeing the exact same pattern. And I'm not sure we should say, well, the rules don't apply. This is different. This is unlike anything else. We've never seen anything like this, when actually this looks exactly like what happens every time Republicans make inroads. 2010 was the big exception because there was so much anger at Barack Obama in 2010 over Obamacare. So you've got these media narratives that have shaped up that, oh, well, it looks like the Democrats are fired up now. The Democrats have momentum. The Democrats could pick up keep the Senate. They could make gains in the Senate. They could actually hold the House. I don't think that's the case. And I think the people saying this are the very same people who missed the 2020 Republican wave. They missed the Republican insurgent strength in 2020. They know their polls are broken. They don't know how to fix their polling. They're inside a media echo chamber that reiterates what the Democrats want you to believe. Republicans have all but left the media. There have been a series of stories about how Republicans no longer return reporters' phone calls. They don't even try to help shape the prevailing national media narratives. They're bypassing the national media. They're going to Fox News and Newsmax and OAN and talk radio, and they're texting and they're talking directly to their voters. They don't need the New York Times to help them with their narrative. All of this is to say that, yeah, I do think that abortion has fired up some Democrats, and they're going to turn out in November. And I didn't originally think that it really would fire them up as much. But I also think that the media that missed the Republicans in 2020 and the media that missed the Donald Trump surge in 2016 and the media that acknowledges Republicans aren't talking to them and the media that acknowledges Democratic polling is broken maybe can't see what's going on under the surface. But I can tell you when I go to the grocery store, people aren't complaining about abortion. They're complaining about grocery prices. And there are still, I did that Joe Biden stickers on gas pumps around the country. Gas prices may be going down, but they're still high. Inflation may not be going up as much, but it's still high. It's not deflationary. The economy is headed into recession. I actually think we may be seeing a Republican surge happening, particularly after the cancellation of student loan debt and Biden's speech last week, and the media is not going to pick up on it. And by the way, I think the Republicans do take back the Senate. I think they pick up Georgia. I think Herschel Walker wins. The chairman of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, Gary Peters, was in Michigan over the weekend, and he was asked how the lay of the land looks. And he cited Arizona, and he cited Pennsylvania, and he cited Nevada even, and New Hampshire. He never mentioned Georgia. Never mentioned Georgia. When the chairman of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee doesn't mention Raphael Warnock beating Herschel Walker, you know, the Democrats, they're not as sure that this thing is a done deal for them as the media would have you believe. I could admit I was wrong, but none of these people ever will. But I'm beginning to think they actually are wrong.